playing an unhealthy amount of Elden Ring Nightreign will also give you an unhealthy amount of experience, and I made a tips and tricks video shortly after the game came out, and I wanted to help people kind of get their footing in this game, but I've not stopped playing the game since making that previous video, and I wanted to make an even better one for you guys with even more tips and tricks to help you get better at the game so you can take on the Everdark fights or the upcoming DLC whenever they do announce it. These tips can range anything from interesting combat tips to out-of-game general knowledge that will help you and your approach to how you want to take on certain bosses and just situations, but hopefully this helps you, and even if you're a veteran, you might learn something new from this video, so I wanted to make this a really good one for you guys, but let's get into it. To begin here, I think one of the best ways to use the Executor's ult is actually as a flask, and what I mean is if you're in a boss fight and you've already run out of heals, but the boss still has a little bit ways to go, you can pop your Executor ult when you're low health and kind of use it as a free healing flask, because when you come out of the ult at the end of it, you will always be given full health back. Now keep in mind you can die when you're in this beast form, although it is fairly rare, it can still happen, so just be careful, but you can kind of use it as an additional flask and it's really good for survivability. Next, when we were all brand new to the game, I think everybody kind of recommended going for your churches first, as healing flasks are always a good thing to have, and when I first started playing the game, I kind of built my general game plan around the churches, and that's still important, but I honestly think that going after your churches last, or at least getting them on the way into circles, is a more efficient way, because unlike pretty much all of the other POIs in Nightreign, the America churches are one of the only ones that don't demand you stay there for any significant period of time, right? It's not like looting ruins or trying to clear a fort or a castle. You can just be in and out of these quick, and I like to kind of do them while I'm in storms so that I can maximize my time that is in the safe zone doing other more productive things. Next, I don't know how many of you have noticed that the Caligo relic is easily one of the best relics in the game, specifically for Duchess and Executor. Now, the description basically says that when there is frostbite in the vicinity, it applies a concealing effect to you. Now, it may not seem like that's really an amazing thing, but when you consider that it also puts chilling mist on your starting weapon, then you can absolutely take advantage of this, because frostbite procced on anything will conceal you, and you want to hang on to your starting weapon ideally so that you can proc this very quickly, and this is great on Executor because not only do you still get to keep the bleed effect on your starting weapon, but you'll also have frostbite on top of that, and with the Executor's amazing arcane scaling, you'll be proccing both frost and bleed, so you'll demolish enemies. It's one of the most OP things in the entire game, and the fact that it conceals you and relieves pressure in certain situations is just the cherry on top, so I would definitely not sleep on this one if you haven't tried it yet. Next, the Royal Revenant is still giving people a lot of trouble. It's one of the most difficult enemies to deal with, especially in co-op games. I still feel like a lot of people are having trouble with this one. There's two very effective ways to deal with these. Number one, if you either have a healing incantation, particularly if you're playing somebody like Revenant or Recluse, you can demolish just by using heal in the vicinity of the Revenant will deal a ton of damage and even stun it for a little bit. But the more effective way, regardless of the character you're playing, is the Revenant only has really forward-facing moves, and you can pretty much just hang to its side the entire time and get free damage. You just have to kind of watch your positioning correctly, but as long as you're hanging on the side, there's technically only one move that can really hit you, but it's very reactable. Otherwise, these things kind of become null and void. They're very easy to dispatch if you just kind of stay out of the front. I get asked a lot in my videos, why does your gameplay look so crisp and why does it look so good? And a lot of that is just down to my PC, and I have an exciting announcement to make. I'm excited to announce that I've partnered with Apex Gaming PCs. One of the most common questions I get when it comes to PC gaming, people ask me all the time, like, what should I get? And I always say that it depends on what you want to use it for and what you're going to be doing with it. If you're just going to be gaming, then you're going to need different hardware than somebody who also plans on recording or streaming, for example. Apex PCs make this really easy, as you can choose between the Apex Bronze, which is a great starting PC that's just for gaming, but there's also the Apex Streamer and the Streamer Plus with beefier specs and a higher capacity to stream and record at a higher quality. And for those of you who are already a bit more familiar with PCs, yes, you can just completely customize one from the parts up, and everyone requires different specs just depending on what their purposes are. So if you want to get into PC gaming or upgrade a little bit, you can use my code CHOPPER for a 3% discount on the website. Not to mention, there is currently a free $5,000 PC giveaway that you can go and enter, and the best part is, even if you've ordered one already, if you do win the giveaway, you'll you'll be refunded that and then given the free Beast PC instead. So go check out Apex Gaming PCs using the link below. Next up is a fun little one that you may or may not know about. Did you know that these Sites of Grace can actually revive you if you're down? Now, this is a little bit situational, I will admit, but there are some field bosses that are actually near an existing Site of Grace, and if you happen to go down and your teammates are tied up or something, you can actually just use that grace to pick you back up. It's a really neat little trick. If you're looking for some free, easy loot, you can actually go to the top of this castle here, and it's an area that I think a lot of people just ignore or completely miss because it otherwise is kind of out of the way, but you need to scale this entire left wall upon entering the main gates. And at the very top here are going to be 3 chests, and I've gotten legendary weapons out of this. I've gotten very extremely rare things. It's always worth checking, especially in the early game or in the first day, because the loot can be incredible. So don't sleep on that. It's actually not too hard to get to as well once you know where it is. Ideally, you want to have it where there's not giants throwing pots at you, because that is a real pain in the ass for this particular location. So otherwise, you should be good to loot this, and you might find some cool stuff. Next, if you ever see the Libra Demon just as a field boss, if he offers you more runes, always take it. He will give you this item called the Symbol of Avarice, and it essentially will give you 10% more runes for your acquisition, but it will slowly eat away at your health. However, it's really not that bad, and you can even offset it with some like continuous HP recovery buffs or certain weapons you can carry, so it's really worth taking if you can have it, but make sure to drop it at the end of day 2 or even before that, because at that point in the game, you're not likely to need it. Once you're level like 13 or 14 before the second night, you probably won't need it anymore. So make sure to get rid of it as soon as you can once you've kind of hit that certain point. Next, I'll show you what to do for one of the rarest occurrences in the whole game. I've only ever gotten this twice out of like 200 plus hours of gameplay. If you get the Tower of Frenzy, a lot of people don't even know what to do with this. All you have to do is kill the enemies around it and then go up to the top and then kill the ones at the top floor, and then the Frenzy Flame will go away and give you a bunch of rewards. Like I said, I've only gotten this like basically twice in 200 hours of gameplay, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you have never encountered this at all, but just in case you do, now you know what to do if you find it. Next, I'm sure a lot of you know to use your gold foul foot before killing a boss or maybe a certain nighttime enemy, but you can also use the silver ones before you loot chests and particularly corpses, because you're likely to get a lot more out of them if you do. Now, this will be a very useful tip later, but get used to using the silver ones as well, because they're not as straightforward to kind of take advantage of as the gold ones are, but we'll come back to those in a bit. Now, here's a little general tip. The circle is going to move in slower the closer it is to the safe zone. So for example, this area over here is going to be moving in a lot faster because it's farther away from the safe zone, where if you kind of play these corners, the zone is going to move in so slow that you can kind of still afford to do things maybe outside of it. Like for example, if a church or a Stake of America is out there, you can kind of go pretty far into the storm and make it back because it's not moving too quickly for you. Next, let's talk about some invasions. Now, one of the best ones is to get Margit the Fell Omen, and if you successfully kill him, you will be given the ability to permanently increase your power with each new Site of Grace you acquire. However, the way to get him to spawn is kind of tricky because it is to some degree completely random, but also it will only appear in certain expeditions, those being for Adele, the Sentient Pest, and also Hailster. Now, I'll show you a list that shows you where all of the special events can occur on certain expeditions, so if you're going after something specific, you might want to consider running that specific expedition associated with it, but hopefully this information helps. Next, if you're doing Everjails, if you ever get this one right here, this choice to either get a flat fee of runes or an increase, especially if you're in day 1, always take the 10% increase. It will pay off way more than just getting that flat rate. It's essentially that old thing of, would you rather have $1 million now or a penny for the rest of your life? Wait, that doesn't really add up. Never mind. Anyways, you get the point I'm trying to make. Next, let's take a look at something that I found that is not only really funny, but it's actually quite useful. Have you ever been down here in the castle trench, but you want to get to the upper floor, but you don't want to take the wall and then go all the way around? You can actually jump off this jellyfish if you're clever enough and actually grab the wall and then immediately get to where you want to go. This is a really difficult, albeit very useful tool if you can pull it off. It's kind of hard, to be honest, but it's actually saved me a lot of time, and it's a very efficient thing if you can get good at it. But I admit this one is also a little situational, but it's a clever little trick just in case you didn't know. Next, let's talk about your relics. Now, keep in mind, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about relic optimization, but keep in mind that a lot of them don't stack, and now with the new update, it should specifically tell you if there is some kind of incompatibility, or if you're running two of the exact same types that don't stack. There should be this kind of indicator right here, but just make sure that you're not doubling up on relics that aren't really that useful to you. Next, one of the biggest changes from the main game of Elden Ring is that blocking with a physical weapon and blocking physical damage specifically is actually a viable defense strategy here. Now, this is kind of crazy because it really doesn't matter the weapon you're using. It will obviously chew through your stamina, but as long as the enemy is dealing purely physical damage, you can block all of it by just simply holding the L button. And obviously, any kind of elemental damage or magic will bypass this blocking, so you want to take a different defensive option, most likely rolling. But at the same time, if it's a purely physical attack that you just want to tank through, don't be afraid to use your blocking. Next is also kind of a fun one. Some of the enemies in the game, as you may know if you're a Dark Souls veteran, can have their tails cut off, and you will actually be given free loot for this. Now, typically they aren't the best weapons. I haven't really gotten anything insane out of a tail cut, but in case you're looking for an additional bonus or some kind of passive, cut off the tail of something like the Gaping Dragon and always get that free loot. You may as well. All right, let's go back to relics for a second and talk about one of the most universally OP relics in the game that you can get. This one right here that gives you a stone sword key, but also permanently increases your attack power for every single Evergaol enemy defeated. So this one should be obvious why it's OP for reasons that only take about 5 seconds to think about. It's every time you kill an Evergaol enemy, you're going to get a stack to your permanent power increase. Now, this is great because you can farm churches and forts and do as many Evergaols as possible, and I universally put this on every single character. There isn't a moment where I'm not running this at least one of my relic slots, and it's easily the best one in the game right now. And keep in mind, these do not stack, so if you have two relics that have the same description, they're only going to have one in effect. So don't waste them, of course, but make sure you have one of these relics and use them on pretty much every character. It's so worth it. Next, let's talk about the free merchant. So a lot of people get confused when they see this icon. So there's two things to explain here. Number one, you can see that there's a regular merchant at pretty much every single encampment, right? You'll find them here at forts, you'll find them at the main castle, and then you'll find them at every single encampment, either in the front or back. And think about these merchants as all being the same. They're one entity. They have the same stock, and if you buy like a Wending Grace, for example, from one of these, you bought them from all. However, occasionally, it's not guaranteed, but in some expeditions, you might find this icon that looks like a little townhouse, and the merchant appears on first glance to be the same, but it's not. In fact, he has a much different stock. You'll have different weapons, expanded talismans. You can even buy a purple smithing stone from him to upgrade your weapon to +2, and so you can also buy stone sword keys here and a Wending Grace if you've already bought one from, let's say, Merchant 1. So you can actually get 3 throughout your expeditions: the regular merchant, the special town merchant, and then the third one in the spirit shelter. So make sure to take advantage of all of these and definitely look out every single game to have this additional one. If you ever have that moment where the Libra spawns in as a field boss and then does that thing where he curses you and takes your health away, I typically recommended fighting him in the past, which would relieve the curse, but now I actually think it's a lot more advantageous to just pay him off. Like, it's a lot of money up front, of course. It's like 35,000 runes on night 2, but it is absolutely worth it if you're confident that you can still get more runes, because you will get a permanent power increase for the number of runes you're holding. And this is best case scenario if you're already level 15 and can just stack up runes. You can deal an insane amount of damage and get like a 40% increase to your overall base if you do this. So I recommend just paying him off. I know it feels bad in the moment, but it's certainly worth it. Let's talk about the secret ruins drops. Now, if you're going through and looting these areas, you might notice that there's a bunch of little like catacombs and just things that go downstairs and little secrets and tunnels. But what you may not know is that there's 2 different configurations of these ruins. And depending on which configuration you're at, the secret loot will be in a different spot. So for this one here that kind of ascends up to the left, you can actually go around the backside here, and there's going to be an illusory floor that you can either like jump through or jump attack or something or roll on, and it should disappear, allowing you to loot these chests down here. And these can contain talismans, they can contain legendary weapons, and some truly amazing things. There is actually an extremely rare item that can be found down here that we'll talk about later, but the other other one can be found if you have the different configuration. It's on the 3rd floor, the uppermost one, and you can see it's right here. It's sort of in the middle of these 2 pillars. But the reason I'm pointing these out is that the loot is fantastic most of the time, and it's definitely worth checking out because it doesn't take that long either. So don't sleep on these. Just remember which configuration of the runes you have, and that will determine where you can find them. Now, let's talk about free legendaries. So specifically, I would say in the Volcano, Shifting Earth, and Noclateo are the best chances at getting legendary weapons and farming them off of bodies. Pretty much all of the corpses here will have something to offer. There's about 16 in Noclateo alone, and if you want to get legendaries, it's worth popping your silver Foulfoot and then going after these corpses. You're pretty much guaranteed to get a legendary at a certain point, and it's a very easy way to farm them. And matter of fact, if you've already killed some of the Everdark bosses, you can use the alternate currency that it gives you to conjure a Shifting Earth event of your choice, making this a very consistent way to play the game. Next is just a little tip, but don't forget to jump occasionally for defense. There are certain bosses which jumping is actually the optimal strategy because it allows you to not only deploy a defensive option, but you can keep attacking and keep pressure on the boss. Particularly, this works great with the Sentient Pest. Other mini bosses like the Erdtree Avatar or even the Black Knife Assassin, you can jump over a lot of their moves, and this makes it a very viable defensive and offensive option at the same time. Next, did you know that certain weapons very rarely can have 2 elements at once? It's very rare to come across, but you might find a weapon maybe in a chest or something that has 2 elements with a diagonal split down the middle. I found a normal sword in a chest one time that is just fire and magic with an icon split down the middle, so your damage is going to be split over these 2 elements, but just keep in mind you can actually find something like this in the very specific case you need it. Next, if you're fighting a field boss or just traversing the open world or trying to clear out dungeons or forts or something, you're going to get a free flask every single minute. Now, this is only if you don't happen to touch or find a new site of grace in between then, but if you're kind of out in the wilderness or, you know, you're in a long extended fight with a boss, you're going to get a free flask every minute, so just keep that in mind. Remember, every single status ailment scales with Arcane in Nightreign, which is very different to the main game of Elden Ring, where only certain things scale with Arcane. Stuff like Scarlet Rot would not work with that, but everything in Nightreign scales with Arcane. So if you're particularly into status ailments, then consider somebody like Executor, who has an amazing scaling in Arcane just across the board. Did you know that there's a secret safe zone inside of Hailster's most powerful moves? He'll do this thing where he goes up into the sky and then comes down with a massive like earthquake, and you can actually avoid this by either running away and a little bit to the left. I think that's how I've always traditionally done it, but actually you can get really close to him, not so close that you're going to be in direct impact, but just off to the side and behind him to where you're kind of like in the eye of the storm, and you will actually take no damage if you position yourself correctly, and also allows you to get a massive punish in the meantime. It can be a little bit tricky to pull off, and I don't get it right every single time, but with enough practice, you'll know exactly where you need to be position-wise, and you will take no damage from this and get a ton of free damage on him as well. If you're still struggling with Hailster, that is, this is a good way to kind of get around that. Next is a very useful tip for getting to the top of the castle. So traditionally, once you clear out essentially this whole section, you can climb up to the top and then fight the final boss that's usually a very tough foe at the top of this castle, but that also gives great rewards if defeated. But you can kind of just skip right up to this thing if you feel like you're already prepared enough. You can scale the side of this wall and then carefully go around this corner, and then you can just jump right up to the top of this platform and you'll be able to take on this boss. You can get to this very easily and you don't even have to fight anything else in the castle. Now, obviously, I still think the other enemies are worth killing because they have good loot in their own right, but if you just want to skip to the main boss in the top of the castle, get maybe something legendary, then you have a very easy access route to get there. If you happen to find yourself in the Blood Ruins and fighting a big Sanguine Noble, remember to also kill these big fat like red blobs behind him as well. There should be 2 of them in these ruins, and these actually drop loot, and you can get really good stuff out of these. They're particularly susceptible to bleed, so you can annihilate these very quickly. It takes you no time at all. You can probably kill these faster than you can kill the Sanguine Noble, but I've honestly gotten like game-altering stuff out of just killing these random blobs, so this is actually one of the best ruins you can go after. Little combat tip to keep in mind, it seems like most of the bosses will target the player who's currently dealing the most damage to them. Now, a really good team can take advantage of this fact and kind of yo-yo the boss around to where once he aggroes on you, then your teammates start dealing damage. Once he turns to them, then it becomes your job and vice versa. You can really shut down bosses by kind of of just knowing how they're going to target players. And you can even further manipulate this by certain items in the game that make you less likely to be targeted. It's a very nuanced thing because every boss's AI functions a little bit differently, so like taking advantage of it kind of requires a lot of experimentation on your own, but it's just something to keep in mind. Also, another thing to keep in mind, if you're doing the old Everjail strat and just want to get extremely overpowered in the first couple minutes of the game, but you're wanting to find more stone sword keys, obviously one of the best ways to find them are either in these churches and you can get them out of chests, or in forts and you can do a similar thing at the top. Now, if you don't happen to find a stone sword key in the first chest you check here, don't forget about the other secret spot with these locations. For the forts, it's actually just to this right pillar. Right when you loot the chest, you can jump up here and climb, and this can give stone sword keys, although I will admit it's a lot more rare than the main one, the primary one that you might loot. And for churches, it's kind of a similar deal where if you don't find a stone sword key here, you want to jump up over these rafters and go all the way around the back, and in this chest you can have another chance to find a stone sword key. Now, I would actually say this one has a better odds of giving that than the fort does. If in your game you happen to come across a walking mausoleum, you can take these down and go inside and duplicate a weapon. However, this is one of the rarest occurrences in the whole game, and in fact, out of my 200 plus hours of playing, I still haven't found one of these. I've seen other people do it, but I still haven't gotten a walking mausoleum for myself. It's honestly kind of insane. Next, here's a really cool combat tip that I accidentally found when fighting the Everdark Adele. If you're playing as Duchess, which I would say at this point Duchess is probably what I feel like my best character is, so I play her a lot, but I found that you can actually restage through grab attacks. So, for example, if you deal a lot of damage to a boss that grabs and then you happen to get grabbed by something like this move, you can restage in that grab and maybe either kill it or do enough damage to make it drop you. Again, admittedly, it's a little situational, but if you save your restage for an enemy that's particularly grabby and you think that that might be a good way to get out of it, I would highly recommend saving it for that because it's actually a lifesaver unironically. If you have the Knight of the Lord's Rune, you can constantly switch weapons to not only boost attack power, but you can swap through any element randomly, meaning you can deal extra damage to whatever you come across. If you need a certain element for a different kind of enemy, like an undead, for example, you need holy, you can just swap to that and just annihilate anything. And finally, if you're going around and looting these secret ruins, you might come across one of the rarest items in the game, or at least a rare item that's actually usable in combat. This is the Regal Omen Bairn, and this is a very potent version of basically the Wraith Calling Bell that you can find at a lot of the gravestones, which kind of summons a spirit to chase down your foes with the cost of a little bit of FP. But the thing is, the Regal Omen Bairn is not only extremely rare, but it also scales equally with every single Night Fair. It doesn't seem to scale any differently with people's stats, so you're not going to be at an advantage or a disadvantage depending on who you're running, but if you come across this item, it is absolutely worth hanging on to. At this point, I just want the DLC to come out because they're either going to add more relics or talismans or weapons and maybe even more Night Fairs. We'll see, but hopefully these will prepare you for the DLC, and I want to thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you later.